Hello and welcome back to Design Hub. I'm Molly, your host, and today we're going to be talking to Professor Phil Sewell, everything about his engineering journey and degree apprenticeships and education in the engineering sector. So, Phil, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's see what you're going to give me.
Awesome. So the first question that I ask people is, what originally drew you into this field, into engineering?
I imagine my answer is going to be like many people. Really developed my love for engineering through a role model in my family. So my grandfather was a printing machine maintenance engineer, and I used to help him fix things in his shed. So obviously that gave me my passion for how things work. And so really engineering became that sort of natural career path for me. In terms of though how I've developed that, I kind of was finishing my degree, looking then for jobs, had no intention of coming into academia, where I've ended up in my whole career. Um, so while I was looking for jobs, I suddenly got a phone call out of the blue from one of my lecturers who was my final year project supervisor when I was doing my degree, and said, "Hi Phil, do you fancy doing a PhD?" And I was like, okay, I don't actually know really much about what a PhD is, what it's all about, but it was a studentship, so it was going to pay for my full course for the 3 odd years that I was doing the PhD, gave me a living allowance, so definitely considered it. Um, Went had a chat with him, learned a bit more about the project that he'd got funding for this, and that really sort of piqued my interest. So it was about using sort of mechanical engineering background knowledge to look at how we could improve the design of lower limb prosthetics or false limbs, more commonly known. And so I thought, well, actually, that's a pretty interesting topic. You could make quite a bit of difference with doing something like that. So I took it on. And then, like most people who end up in academia doing research, doing a PhD, ended up following that up with a research associate post. Then doing that, I was doing a bit of lecturing on the side, really enjoyed that. And suddenly you end up getting absorbed into academia, and I really haven't looked back since.
Awesome. So in your wide span career, as you said, you've done everything from teaching and research and everything. Are there any like key moments that you would say stick out specifically as something that's like for you either made an impact or something that you've been quite proud of doing?
Yeah, quite a few, but I still look back very fondly on really where I started with the prosthetics research projects. That's something that's followed me throughout my whole career. I've maintained being engaged in that research area and have been developing it over a number of years. Obviously, really incredibly rewarding seeing how that engineering you can put into practice to have an impact on people's lives. So I did the work. But then following on from that, I've had the opportunity to get some funding, get my own PhD students continue on that work. So we've really expanded from what the original aim was to try and improve this fit of the socket into looking at other areas into prosthetic design. So I've had PhD students look at design of sports prosthetics and also child prosthetics as well. So just really seeing that sort of first ideas suddenly develop into more and more research projects is really rewarding, and that's what research is all about. You're never going to come to the end of the journey. Solving one problem leads to many more that then needs to be challenged. But okay, part of that whole piece of work for me was about also the fact that I got to work with a number of companies while we were developing the research project. And so having that industry academic partnership really became quite a powerful thing for me and helped me develop those kind of networks in other ways to help me come into other research projects as well down the line.
And in your work in prosthetics, are there any like challenges that you've faced? Was there like a particular point in one of your projects that was hard and how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're dealing with designing for people, not maybe for aircraft or boats, whatever,
Mm,
every everybody is an individual and everybody has different needs. And you're not only dealing with designing something that mechanically fits, you're
Yeah.
dealing with the emotions of the person who you're having to fit that to. So you could get the best fitting prosthetic in the world, but if that person doesn't want to accept that prosthetic,
Mm.
you're going to be an uphill struggle all the way. So the challenge is really to try and separate out those two components. I can think of the fitting of a prosthetic in two ways. Think of fit, which is it should mechanically fit well. It should allow that patient to carry out activities of daily living, and it shouldn't cause them pain along the way. But then you've got on top of that comfort, which I think then encapsulates more holistically both the person and the user acceptance, as well as the fit and the mechanical elements. And the challenge is to get both of those things right. So there's also a bit of psychology involved in the project, which we did at some points in the project also look at that element, bring in sort of a multidisciplinary team as well. That was quite a challenge, quite interesting. Obviously, took me out of my comfort zone, looking into that sort of more wider user acceptance aspect of
Was
it.
it quite fun exploring the kind of the different aspects that you weren't necessarily like aware of?
Yeah, I know. Understanding the psychology of people and how different everybody is was
Mm.
really interesting to get into. And nothing, again, I never thought that would be anything of interest for me in there, being very mechanical focused, technology biased. But actually, I found that quite an interesting challenge. And that's really come out in some of the future work we've done around looking at sports prosthesis and the kind of acceptance of use of sports prosthesis in both for kind of competitive use, but also just for children to help improve their lives as well. So bringing that knowledge through to those projects was quite a valuable experience.
So would you say like adapting as would you rather adapt as you went along? Would you say that was an important factor in the work especially?
You can't do research if you're not adaptable. It's you've got an aim to start with, and this is I
Mm.
think this is one of the issues, or one of the challenges when you've got someone starting a PhD from scratch. They think they're going to have a well-defined project, A, B, C, D. You're going to get to a solution at the end. PhD research is just not like that. You are learning as you go along. You're finding out that maybe what you originally thought wasn't the right way to go, and you're having to find alternative paths, or you're finding new things out that suddenly you've got to explore, and you kind of zigzag your way through to a solution rather than having a straight path that you might have in some other more defined kind of projects.
I can imagine that must be difficult for
It's
if you've got a
tough.
plan in your head and then just
Once you get your head around that it's okay not to know where you're going, which is
mm.
kind of come off, just take that mindset, it becomes really exciting because it just opens you up to be able to look at things in a different way, challenge yourself, and realize that there's so much you can do in the world to make a difference and through many different pathways.
Well, talking of many different pathways, you're very involved in the degree apprenticeship, obviously at Bournemouth University. Could you give us like, obviously there's different routes and an apprenticeship being one of them. And for people that may or may not be watching or listening, that are considering a degree apprenticeship, is there a chance you could give us kind of an overview of what it involves?
Yeah, of course. I think from my perspective, I got involved in degree apprenticeships through my work in the engineering department at the university and thinking that we need alternative ways to help upskill our local region. So we developed that engineering pathway, apprenticeship pathway. Since then, in my new role, I've kind of taken on that learning, and I'm now actually overseeing apprenticeships for the whole university. So I'm looking after nursing apprenticeships, business apprenticeships, and engineering apprenticeships. And I'm seeing that the apprenticeships in all the fields are making a real difference to industry in terms of either upskilling staff who are already in employment, who really are ready to move on to their next role, and also to see companies use the apprenticeships to bring new people into their business. So key thing for me to say about degree apprenticeships and apprenticeships just in general are, most importantly, an employer needs to recognise that it's a job with training. It's not training with a job. So I've heard barriers from employers about taking on apprentices in saying things like, oh, they're just going to be a burden. I'm going to have to just spend my time looking after the apprentice. But first and foremostly, they're an employee. They're working 80% of their time in the company and 20% of their time is training. And like any other employee that comes in, they will be doing a job and a valuable job for you throughout the course of their apprenticeship.
Mm.
So I think that's a key message that I would put to employers, and I'd really want to challenge employers to say if they're not already thinking about apprenticeships, it's something that they should start to do. There are so many case studies out there that demonstrate what a benefit it can have to the company.
And what kind of like support or training would you say is offered maybe on a degree apprenticeship as opposed to an actual degree, or just any training or support in general?
Yeah, so our apprentices, they're going to get, when they're studying on their 20% of the job, they get academic mentoring, study skill support, careers advice, additional learning needs support, coaching, basically a lot of things that any undergraduate student would have access to. They can use the sports facilities. They can benefit from having the same kind of um, ability to access all of those resources. But the benefit being that then they can go into their workplace and can see how things that they're studying on their program and the assessments that they're being asked to do on their program can then link back into the work that they're actually doing. So in terms of the actual work side of things, every assessment that we give the apprentices has to link back to a valuable piece of work within their workplace. So again, that's really handy for the employer because they're seeing those direct benefits from the assessment work that the apprentices are doing as well.
Yeah, I can see how companies would be more inclined to hire apprentices as, they're helping develop certain skills that would directly relate to their own company, wouldn't they?
They are, they are. There's an apprenticeship standard that has to be met for an apprentice to pass their apprenticeship, and that has inside it something called knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So these knowledge, skills, and behaviours have been developed by an employer trailblazing group. So they're there and they're actually very much tailored towards ensuring that what the apprentice is learning is very relevant to their particular discipline that they're working in. Sometimes there's employers will say things like maybe what a student does in a degree is not so relevant. They've got to reteach them when they get graduates come in, for example. But with an apprenticeship, because all these knowledge skills have been written directly by this employer group, these apprentices are kind of learning everything that's very, very relevant throughout the course of their apprenticeship. So there's that less need to have to retrain as they're coming in. And
Yeah.
evidence shows again that an apprentice is very much more likely to be loyal to your business than maybe a graduate might be. A graduate might be coming in with their first job, thinking of it as a stepping stone, moving on to something else. Whereas if you've invested in that apprentice, they're much more likely to stay loyal with you and want to stay within your business. And again, I sort of read some stats the other day. Employers can't ignore apprentices nowadays because the stats that I saw said that about 25% of 18-year-olds now coming out are thinking about apprenticeships as being a viable route for them, and rather than going into the traditional route through university. So a quarter of all students coming out want to think about apprenticeships. Just an example, we've recently advertised out with a company for an apprentice for a particular role that the company's got. I think they had something like 110 applications for this one job. And what they're getting is a ability to be able to pick an extremely high caliber candidate by the nature of the number of applications that they've
Mhm.
got. So they're getting a chance as well to get premium graduates or grouping students onto their apprenticeship programs. So we've really got to get to a point though where supply is not being outstripped by demand. At the moment, there is far more still, without it sort of getting too mainstreams, many more students wanting to apply for apprenticeships than there are actual apprenticeships available for them to actually go and study. And we talk constantly about having skills shortages. Well, we've got a way to address that gap if employers come on board more with this route into upskilling.
I know for me as an apprentice who also went to university, I realized university wasn't really for me. And the apprenticeship I'm on is a lot more structured. I actually think I prefer learning while doing and also earning. I think that's a good appeal for it. And where would you possibly see apprenticeships evolving? Would you see like hopefully it will evolve into more of a mainstream option?
Well, there's a lot going on at the moment in the apprenticeship world. With the change of government, there's been a very big shift in the way apprenticeships are going to work, I think, down the line. So what I expect to see happening down the line is much more flexibility and innovation around delivery of apprenticeship programs. And we're already starting to see a bit more flexibility come into the apprenticeship rules about how we can manage what's called the off-the-job time of the apprentice, the time when they're not working, more flexibility about how we can set that out. And so that is there to really support employers as well, so they can have a bit more flexibility in the way the apprentices learn. We're going to see some change because at the moment there's an apprenticeship levy that pays for apprenticeship training. Employers of certain sizes will be paying into that levy pot, but the government have announced that that levy pot is going to be changing to something called a growth and skills levy, and they're broadening out what the levy pot can actually be spent on by employers. So at the moment, it strictly has to be apprenticeships. Down the line, we're looking at making maybe that pot available to also spend on some more sort of short forms of training. Nothing has been announced yet. I think we're expecting some more news in the autumn about what it can be spent on. I think it's still going to be very tightly constrained. I think what we've had this year was a bit of instability. So employers have heard this message and thinking, oh, I'm going to hold back a bit from using my levy because I might be able to start to use this levy on this training, that training, and so on. And so that's had a bit of a knock-on effect on some of the apprenticeship starts, numbers of apprenticeship starts. But I think employers maybe are going to expect more than they're going to get. So at one point, Labour was saying that companies would be able to spend up to 50% of their levy on something, other forms of training. That's been rolled back on. It's probably going to be much less than that now. And I think it's going to be much more tightly constrained than what was originally thought of. So I think companies, if you're holding back at the moment on using your levy for other things, I think probably just get on and get those apprentices in and spend your levy money. We've had a knockback as a university, like many universities, is recently the government have de-invested in master's level or level 7 apprenticeships. So from January next year, you can only get funded to do a level 7 apprenticeship if you're over 22. So anyone under that age can't be funded for their apprenticeship. Government said employers can carry on to pay for apprentices to go through that training, but obviously that involves then the employer finding money from another pot. And the whole reason that they've done that is because they want to see a shift in more apprenticeship starts at the younger age, at the lower levels.
Okay.
Now, I think that's all well and good, and I think it's definitely something we need. We know that we've got these large number of I don't know if you heard the term NEET, not in employment, education and training. There's a large number of people at a young age in that pot at the moment, which are not contributing to obviously the economy because they're doing neither things, and that might be one way to tackle it. But when you read so many of the reports that have come out, there's been a recent Skills England report, for example, and we've had the industrial strategy report come out. Higher level skills are massively in demand, but we're now taking away funding for some of those high level skills. So there seems to be a bit of a mismatch really about what's needed and what we're actually still have a funding available for.
Can't seem to make up their mind.
Well, I think it's there's so many conflicting priorities. Something's got to give somewhere because there's only a limited pot of money that can be spent on apprenticeships. Um, I was really pleased to see recently that we were really right because we run a nursing apprenticeship. It's called Advanced Clinical Practitioner Apprenticeship, which is a master level apprenticeship, really needed in the NHS. All of the apprentices that we've got on that program are over the 21, so would never have been eligible for funding if we were starting new cohorts.
Mm.
But the NHS have come together and realised how important this is, and have actually found another pot of money to pay for carrying on that program for another 3 years.
Oh,
And
that's brilliant.
so that's brilliant, a piece of news. So it's either going to be that other fields are going to have to find a way of doing that as well if they still want those high level skills. So we, for example, we're in the middle of developing a postgraduate engineer apprenticeship. So an apprenticeship that effectively anyone who's finished a degree apprenticeship could have come on to get their kind of a master's level qualification, a master's level apprenticeship. When we heard the news about the level 7, we had to stop because there wasn't any then ability to have a market for that program, and that's a real shame. So we've got to think about how can we still service what industry needs, because
Mm.
in terms of master's level, we need those chartered engineers. We need them to have the accredited qualifications to then become chartered engineers. And it would have been great if we'd obviously had a levy pot that employers could have used to put their apprentices through that program to be able to achieve that. But that pot's not going to be there. Employers are still going to need these higher level, higher skilled engineers. So again, they're going to have to think about how they're going to put some money aside to help pay to train either their current staff who want upskilling, or bringing in new staff at that level. And I think that's really important for me. I think is seeing that we're providing a whole pathway through in engineering, right from school leaver age right through to that postgraduate master's age, where we're getting them to build up the skills, build up their understanding and knowledge through the qualification all right through the whole levels. That's the only way we're going to get more people into, I think, into the industry is seeing that career pathway right through from leaving school right through to kind of becoming experts at the master's level.
So would you say that's something that motivates you to stay within the industry to continue doing all of like your research and industry work and your education work, sort of being able to get the next generation of engineers in?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a reason that's kept me going in education for 20 plus years, whatever it is. I don't think about it. It's been long enough. But but for me, the reason I'm still an academic is because every day is different.
Mm.
I feel like I've got several hats on that's spinning constantly because I'm doing a piece of research over here, I'm doing some teaching over here, I'm looking after apprenticeships over here. All of these things just keep you interested
Mm.
uh, because you're doing so many different things. And so then going on that graduation stage, for example, for us it's in November, seeing those students, apprentices, their friends and family come over the stage, thanking you afterwards is just again another thing that keeps you going in an academic world.
Oh, that must be such a good feeling.
Uh, mo mo Most certainly, yeah, you get some really positive feedback from parents and things who you never would have thought the student would even talk about you or anything like that to their parents, but then you hear actually, yeah, you have had some kind of impact on them, and that just gives you a buzz, really.
And so the last question I'm going to ask you is, speaking of graduation, what is a piece of advice, or pieces of advice that you would give to someone who is either just starting out in the industry or is thinking about going on to do a degree apprenticeship or a degree in engineering? What would you say to them?
Well, if I focus on degree apprenticeships, I would just say go for it. There's so much, well, you see so much about what the difference a degree apprenticeship has in terms of the skills you learn, the fact that you're earning money, you're not getting into debt compared to maybe following a traditional route. But I say I'm not saying people should not follow a traditional route. It's right for a lot of people, but for the people who are also apprenticeships are right for, it's a really good way to get into an industry and develop. Um, I would also say, really, to the employers, like I said earlier on, they've really got to get onto this now and recognize that this is going to be a really important route for them to also get the right people into their business. I can
Mm.
go to meetings, boards, and so on with employees, and I hear complaining about, oh, there's nobody out there. I can't get the staff that I need. But have you thought about really being able to mold them yourself from a young age, being able to have that influence yourself on the skills that they're developing? Because an apprenticeship is very much an employer-led activity. So we're developing and running things that the employer needs in the way that they need. So um, get the employers wanting it more. Definitely, it's going to be completely a really great route for potential apprentices. Again, if there's someone who wants to get into an apprenticeship, doesn't know where to start, I think the key thing to say is the difference is that they can't come to the university and apply for an apprenticeship in the same way as a traditional degree course you'd apply for, because you've got to get the job first, and then the training that we offer comes with the job. So when someone's thinking about doing an apprenticeship, they need to go and start signing themselves up to there's a website from the government have called Find an Apprenticeship. You can sign up to alerts on the particular areas you're interested in, also the radius that you're looking for apprenticeships in. You can get alerts when jobs come up in that area. Employers advertise on typical job sites as well. And if there's nothing coming up, I'd also really encourage potential apprentices just to be proactive. Go and actually knock on a company's door and say, do you know about apprenticeships? Have you heard that if you take on apprentice, you'll be able to get the training element of this apprenticeship for free? And there's also tax breaks on national insurance as well for those who are taking on apprenticeships. So I don't think there's any excuse from a business perspective not to try and consider and think about whether it's something right for their business. And we've got employers from SMEs right through to multinational companies. So again, the size of the employer is not an issue either.
So just any young person out there, go for it.
Yeah, that's all I can say is go for it. If you don't try, you don't get, do you? And we're seeing, those who are really savvy are the ones who are getting the apprenticeships because they've recognised that they need to be proactive and really push. I think just to say though, there are certain demographics who are going to be less disadvantaged in trying to get apprenticeships because they've not maybe got the family networks that other potential apprentices have got, and obviously they need support as well. So we're doing projects, for example, where we're going into more disadvantaged schools and we're working with students to look at things like how can you put together an application for apprenticeship? Can we do mock interviews for those potential apprentices and so on? So it's not to see that part of the population is disadvantaged from getting apprenticeships themselves too.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I think we're just out of time. Thank you so much, Phil, for coming on and speaking. It's been brilliant having you on. This will be released at the end of August, so keep your ears out. And anyone listening, the IED, this is an IED podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're basically on all the social media, so give us a follow. Once again, thank you so much, Phil.
Thanks, Molly. Really enjoyed it. It went very quick.
So until next time, bye.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.